California is currently experiencing a severe drought, and experts are uncertain when it will end. The past 3 years may have been the driest in California's history. However, at the same time, the state is also suffering from severe flooding. Millions of local residents are still surveying the damage, while more than 100,000 people are without power. This hardly makes any sense. How could drought and flooding happen in one place at the same time? In this video, we learn about this strange situation and the state's multi-billion-dollar mega dam to fix it. But first, we need to talk about California's water. California doesn't have it easy when it comes to water. Most of the state, including the Great Basin, the Mojave Desert, and the Colorado River, are official deserts. When the first American settlers arrived in the area hundreds of years ago, water was scarce, and it was difficult for them to work the land. Things are not much different today. In October 2021, the governor of California declared a national drought emergency. He urged citizens to reduce water consumption by 15% in the hope that things will return to normal. However, almost 18 months later, in 2023, the state of emergency is still in place. They have been in drought for longer than officially stated, 1,000 days, but that's only part of the story. California has experienced heavy rainfall during the prolonged drought, causing severe flooding in parts of the state. The city was devastated, 22 people died, and the governor declared a state of emergency again. The state is currently going through a period of extreme drought and concurrent emergency flooding. But how can California have two opposing states of emergency at the same time? Water management is crucial. During heavy rains, large amounts of water fall to the ground and flood the area, but only a small amount is properly collected and stored. By the time the sun comes out again, most of the water will have been drained or flowed into the sea, and the drought will continue as if it had never rained at all. That's what happened in California. During the rainy season, the state cannot collect enough water to make up for dry periods. Instead, they rock back and forth. Too much water, then too little, too much, then too little again and again. The big question is, can they do something about it? Well, they did try. In the 1950s, the state went through a period similar to today, with droughts followed by floods. The state decided enough was enough and created the National Water Project, commonly known as SWP. The project has a simple goal: to find a way to store water during floods so that it can be recycled during droughts. In the early years, they built more than 20 dams to store water into huge reservoirs during heavy rains. Probably the most famous is Lake Oroville, the reservoir behind the Oroville Dam. The dam itself is the tallest dam in the United States at more than 200 meters high and holds hundreds of millions of cubic feet of water in its reservoir. Another famous example is Pyramid Lake, located just outside Los Angeles. During droughts, the water collected by these huge reservoirs can be transported to farms and cities. It's an impressive process, relying on a vast network of canals, aqueducts, and pumping stations. Sometimes, the currents can travel hundreds of kilometers and even across mountains. The most famous component is the California Aqueduct, which transports water from the Sierra Nevada to Los Angeles, forking and serving millions of people along the way. At some point, the Edmonston pumping station had to pump that water over the 2,000-foot-high Tehachapi Mountains. It's like trying to pump water up One World Trade Center. No pumping station in the world pumps water higher than Edmonston. Overall, this is one of the most advanced and sophisticated water management systems in the world, but when it was built in the 1960s and 1970s, it was only intended as a first stage. There were plans to build more dams and canals in the 1980s and 1990s, but these projects were put on hold for various reasons. It's all about the economy. California has been grappling with mounting debt, but also has other problems, including environmental concerns. These water features disrupt the natural flow of the river and make life difficult for many native species. Populations of salmon and steelhead trout that swim upstream during the breeding season have plummeted following desalination. Due to the many dams and pumping stations, these fish can no longer reach their breeding grounds. For these reasons, California has decided to suspend the next round of construction, hoping that the first phase will be completed on its own. In the early years, the new facility really brought about a change. About two-thirds of the water collected by the system is distributed to people in urban areas, while the rest is used to irrigate orchards and farms. The system as a whole is estimated to bring in about $400 billion annually to the national economy. But in recent years, existing parts of the state's waterworks have run into trouble. When these components were first built, California's population was less than 20 million. But the number of people living in the state has doubled in recent decades. The demand for water has also increased. Dams and canals are difficult to maintain, which is one reason why the state has experienced so many drought problems lately. According to Mike Wade, executive director of the California Farm Water Coalition, our water needs have far exceeded what the systems were designed for. As I looked around, I saw that it was a beautiful day by the lake. What do you see when you look around? I see a dangerously low reservoir. Climate change isn't helping either. Average temperatures in California have risen by nearly 2 degrees Celsius over the past century, leading to severe heat waves. Droughts are getting worse, populations are growing, and water management systems are in dire need of modernization. Because of this, the state decided to build a reservoir. A few miles north of Sacramento lies a narrow valley with cliffs and hills on either side. The terrain is dry and overgrown with yellowish grasses, shrubs, and trees on the open plains. There are also buildings, but not many, only a few scattered buildings and a few residents. The settlement is marked as a location on the map, but it is not an official city. Now the state wants to flood the valley and turn it into a lake. On the project website, the team describes it as an environmentally friendly offshore river. Reservoirs collect excess water from larger storms and store it for use during dry periods. This idea has been around since the 1950s. It almost made it to the first phase of the California Water Management Project, but S2P ultimately decided the plan was too ambitious, especially considering the cost of up to $4 billion. So they decided to turn their attention to other projects, like the gigantic Oroville Dam. But in recent years, thinking has changed. This project is worthwhile. If they succeed, a reservoir at this location won't completely solve California's drought problems, but it will certainly help. The lake holds more than 2 cubic kilometers of water, enough to supply hundreds of thousands of California homes with drinking water for a year. So how is it built? Workers will start by building a series of dams designed to close the gap between the hills on the valley's edge. The two main dams are the Sites Dam and the Golden Gate Dam, both on the east side of the valley, with the rest on the north. These dams will turn the valley into a giant watertight bathtub. Next, the reservoir needs to be filled. Usually, this is done by damming the river and flooding the valley. That's what happened with the Oroville Dam. Builders blocked the Feather River and waited for the water to fill the valley behind. During periods of heavy rain, the river continues to fill the valley, filling the reservoir for future use. But there are no big rivers in the Satis Valley, only a few shallow streams. Therefore, a slightly different method needs to be used to fill the new reservoir. About 15 miles east of the valley runs the Sacramento River, California's largest river. During the rainy season, the state plans to draw water from the river and direct it over fields, hills, and towns before flowing into the Satis Valley. It's like a giant faucet filling a giant bucket. During times of drought, the water can be drained, relieving pressure on the surrounding area. It takes a lot of energy to pump the water from the river into the valley, but S2P thinks it's worth it, especially since they'll be recovering some of it. Whenever water is released from the reservoir, it flows through a series of hydroelectric generators, providing about 80% of the energy originally used to pump the water. Construction is currently scheduled to start in 2024 or at worst 2025. It will be finished in 6 years, in 2030 or 2031, and some are already lamenting that it won't be finished sooner. When the floods hit California in early 2023, large amounts of rainwater flowed into the Sacramento River. If the site's reservoir is operational, it could hold floodwaters for future use, enough to power more than 200,000 California homes for the remainder of the year, said Jerry Brown, executive director of the Sites Project Authority. This is exactly the type of scenario Sites is designed for. It was a missed opportunity, one that people don't want to miss again. But are there any downsides? Some people think so. To fund the project, SWP may raise water prices, with some fearing as much as 300%. It's unclear if this will actually happen, but it's a matter of great concern. What's the point of providing extra water if no one can afford it? Environmental groups have also questioned whether the water pumped from the Sacramento River has affected the fish there. Hike along the river. When entire rivers are blocked with dams like in Oroville, environmental damage is inevitable. The fish can no longer swim upstream because of the concrete wall. But because it's a downstream reservoir, the project won't actually choke the Sacramento River. The only distraction is the heavy-duty pumps, but they are fitted with state-of-the-art fish filters to keep animals from being sucked in. SOP has also committed to using some of the water collected in site's reservoirs to support local species. Many fish species breed in cold, deep pools that become warmer and shallower during the dry season. A site's reservoir will feed these pools and keep the water at a suitable depth and temperature for breeding. It is an important part of the whole project. Supporting humans is a priority, but helping other species is also a goal. It is still possible that the project will never materialize. They haven't raised enough money yet, but as of today, the reservoir looks like it will be operational in 2030. Do you think this is a good addition to California? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.